I never thought my life would turn into one of those stories people binge late at night, the kind where you keep asking yourself how everything went so wrong so fast. If you had met me back then, you would have seen a woman who believed marriage was about trust, patience, and building a future together. I believed love could fix misunderstandings, even the ones involving a difficult mother-in-law. I truly thought that no matter how tense things got, my husband and I were on the same team. I was wrong. And the moment my mother-in-law picked up her phone and called her private security, everything I believed about my marriage began to fall apart. It didn't start with screaming or threats. It started quietly, almost politely. My mother-in-law was always the kind of woman who smiled with her lips, but never with her eyes. She came from money, the kind of money that comes with influence and control, and she made sure everyone knew it without ever saying it out loud. From the day I married her son, I felt like I was on trial. The way I cooked, the way I spoke, the way I dressed, even the way I laughed around him seemed to bother her. Still, I told myself it was normal family tension. After all, people always say mother-in-law problems are part of marriage. My husband tried to stay neutral at first. He would tell me, "She just worries too much," or "That's how she is, don't take it personally." I wanted to believe him. I wanted peace. So I stayed quiet when she made comments about my background, when she questioned my intentions, and when she reminded me, again and again, that everything my husband had came from her. I convinced myself that patience would win her over. I didn't realize that my silence was being mistaken for weakness. The day everything changed felt ordinary at first. We were visiting her house, the same massive place that always made me feel small. The air was tense, but I had grown used to that. Then a simple disagreement turned into something bigger. She accused me of disrespecting her rules, her home, her authority. I tried to explain myself, to calm things down, but she wasn't listening. Her voice grew cold, and she said something that still echoes in my head. She told me I didn't belong there. Before I could respond, she stepped away and made a call. I didn't know who she was calling at first. My husband looked confused, but he didn't stop her. Minutes later, men in uniforms appeared. Private security. Standing in front of me like I was a threat. Like I was dangerous. My heart started racing. I had never been so embarrassed, so humiliated in my life. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to shut this madness down. But he didn't. Instead, he stood there in silence. That silence hurt more than anything she had ever said to me. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a mother-in-law who didn't like me. This was about power, control, and the terrifying possibility that my husband was slowly being pulled away from me, right in front of my eyes. She told the security to escort me out, not as a guest, not as family, but as someone who didn't belong. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of her. I walked out with my head high, even though inside, I was breaking. As the door closed behind me, I knew something had shifted. Something that couldn't be undone easily. When my husband came home later, he wasn't the same. He said he needed space. He said things like, "You should have handled it better, and you know how my mother is." His words felt rehearsed, like they weren't entirely his own. It was as if her voice had replaced mine in his head. I could feel the distance growing, day by day. The marriage I thought was strong suddenly felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. I started questioning everything. Was I really the problem? Had I pushed too hard? Or was this exactly what my mother-in-law wanted all along? To turn her son against me without ever looking like the villain. Friends told me to stand my ground. Others warned me that fighting a powerful family never ends well. I felt alone, confused, and scared of what was coming next. But here's the thing no one tells you about moments like this. When you're pushed into a corner, when everything you love is threatened, something inside you changes. I began to see patterns I had ignored before. The manipulation. The subtle lies. The way my husband's opinions suddenly mirrored hers. And slowly, I realized that this story wasn't over yet. Because while my mother-in-law thought she had won, while she believed calling her private security would scare me into submission, She had no idea what she had just started. She didn't know that I was done staying quiet. And she definitely didn't know the truth that was about to come out, a truth that would shake her perfect image and force my husband to see things clearly. What happened next would test my strength, my marriage, and everything I believed about family and loyalty. And just when it seemed like I was about to lose it all, something unexpected happened, something that changed the entire game. After that night, sleep stopped coming easily. Every sound in the house felt louder, every silence heavier. I would lie awake replaying everything in my head, the look on my mother-in-law's face, calm and confident, the way the security guards avoided my eyes, and most of all, the way my husband didn't reach for my hand. The man I married used to ask how my day was, used to notice when I was quiet. Now he moved around me like I was a problem he didn't know how to fix. I started thinking about the early days of our relationship, trying to understand how we got here. When we first met, he was warm and attentive, nothing like the distant man sharing my bed now. He talked about wanting a simple life, one built on love, not money or status. Back then, he admitted his relationship with his mother was complicated. She had raised him alone after his father passed away, and their bond was intense. I thought I understood. I respected it. What I didn't realize was how deep her influence ran, and how easily it could be turned against me. Before we got married, there were small warning signs. She insisted on being involved in every decision, from the wedding venue to the guest list. If I disagreed, she would smile and say she only wanted what was best for her son. My husband would gently ask me to compromise, reminding me how much she had done for him. I told myself it was temporary, that once we were married, things would settle. I never imagined that her control would grow stronger instead of fading. After the incident with the private security, her presence felt closer than ever, even when she wasn't physically there. My husband started spending more time on the phone with her, stepping outside to talk, lowering his voice. When I asked what they discussed, he brushed it off, saying it was family matters. The word family stung more than it should have. Was I no longer part of that? One evening, I overheard part of their conversation by accident. I wasn't trying to listen, but her voice was loud enough to travel through the walls. She was upset, talking about respect, loyalty, and how outsiders never truly understand their family values. I froze when she mentioned my name. She said I was changing him, pulling him away from the life he was meant to have. My husband didn't argue. He didn't defend me. That silence spoke volumes. I began to feel like a stranger in my own marriage. Every conversation felt careful, like we were both avoiding something. When I tried to bring up how hurt I was, he accused me of overreacting. He said his mother felt threatened and that I should apologize to keep the peace. The idea of apologizing for being escorted out like a criminal made my chest tighten. Still, a part of me wondered if giving in would save my marriage. As days passed, I noticed other things that didn't sit right. Important documents that were once kept in our shared drawer were moved. Financial discussions became tense and vague. He started saying things like, "My mom thinks it's safer this way," or "She knows how these things work." It felt like decisions were being made about my life without me in the room. The trust between us was slowly eroding, replaced by doubt and fear. At the same time, my mother-in-law began reaching out directly. Her messages were polite but sharp, filled with advice that felt more like warnings. She talked about how marriages fail when women don't know their place, how families fall apart when sons are torn between love and duty. She never outright threatened me, but every word carried weight. It was clear she wanted me to feel small, uncertain, and isolated. I tried leaning on friends, but it was hard to explain the situation without sounding dramatic. "It's just family drama," some said. Others warned me that power dynamics like this rarely end well. Late at night, I found myself searching online for stories similar to mine, reading about controlling mothers-in-law, broken marriages, and emotional manipulation. Instead of comfort, I felt a growing sense of dread. Too many of those stories didn't end happily. What scared me most was how my husband was changing. He became defensive, quick to anger, especially when I questioned his mother's involvement. He accused me of trying to turn him against her, the exact thing she had accused me of doing. It was like watching someone slowly slip away, replaced by a version shaped by someone else's expectations. I wondered if he even noticed it himself. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from someone connected to his family. The conversation was brief and vague, but it hinted at things I wasn't supposed to know. Old family secrets. Decisions made long before I came into the picture. When I asked my husband about it later, his reaction was immediate and intense. He told me to stay out of matters that didn't concern me. That was the moment I realized there was more going on than just a difficult mother-in-law. The house began to feel tense, like the calm before a storm. Every interaction was loaded with unspoken words. I felt like I was walking on thin ice, unsure of what might trigger the next argument or silent treatment. Yet beneath the fear, something else was growing. Awareness. I started paying closer attention, connecting dots I had ignored before. The way his mother controlled information. The way she positioned herself as the victim while quietly pulling strings. I didn't know exactly what I was dealing with yet, but I knew this wasn't just about a family disagreement. This was about control, loyalty, and power, and I was standing right in the middle of it. My mother-in-law believed she could push me out without resistance. My husband believed keeping peace meant keeping me quiet. Neither of them realized that once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. As I gathered pieces of the puzzle, I felt torn between fear and determination. I didn't know who I could trust or how far the situation could go. All I knew was that something big was coming, something that would force everyone to show their true colors. And as the tension grew thicker each day, I couldn't shake the feeling that the next move, whether mine or hers, would change everything forever. The more I paid attention, the more uneasy I became. It was no longer just about how my mother-in-law treated me. It was about how deeply her influence had wrapped itself around my marriage. I started noticing how my husband hesitated before answering simple questions, like he was weighing whose side he was supposed to be on. Even his body language changed around me, shoulders tense, eyes guarded. The man who once felt like my safe place now felt like someone I had to tiptoe around. I began thinking about my own role in all of this. Had I ignored red flags because I was in love? Had I mistaken control for care? Looking back, there were moments when my husband leaned on his mother for approval instead of trusting his own judgment. I used to find it endearing, proof of how close-knit they were. Now it felt suffocating, like there was no room for me in that bond. One night, during dinner, his phone buzzed nonstop. He glanced at it, then flipped it face down. I asked if everything was okay. He snapped that it was work-related and changed the subject. Later, when he went to shower, curiosity got the better of me. I didn't check his phone, but I noticed how tense he was afterward, pacing the room, making calls in hushed tones. Whatever was happening involved his mother, and it wasn't small. At the same time, my mother-in-law started spreading her version of events within the family. I began receiving distant, awkward messages from relatives who once welcomed me warmly. Some hinted that I was misunderstood. Others avoided me altogether. It felt like a quiet campaign was happening behind my back, painting me as the problem. The isolation was heavy, and it made me question my place in this family even more. There were moments when my husband seemed conflicted. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd catch him staring at the ceiling, lost in thought. Once he admitted he felt torn between us. That confession should have brought us closer, but instead it scared me. Being torn meant he hadn't chosen yet. And I feared that his mother was already pushing him toward a decision. I tried to suggest counseling, hoping a neutral space might help us communicate. He brushed it off, saying we didn't need outsiders involved. The word outsiders echoed something his mother often said. It was becoming clear that her mindset was shaping his, slowly but steadily. Every attempt I made to fix things seemed to hit an invisible wall. Meanwhile, bits of information kept surfacing. I learned that my mother-in-law had helped my husband financially more than I realized, even after we were married. There were strings attached to that help, unspoken expectations that loyalty came first. It explained why he felt trapped, why standing up to her seemed impossible. Understanding this didn't make the situation easier, but it did add another layer to the conflict. I also started questioning my own safety, not physically, but emotionally and financially. If things went wrong, would I be left with nothing? The thought terrified me. I began quietly organizing my personal documents, just in case. It felt wrong, like I was preparing for a future I didn't want to accept, but something inside told me I needed to be ready. From my mother-in-law's perspective, I could almost see the story she was telling herself. She believed she was protecting her son from a woman who threatened the family's stability. In her mind, she was the hero, the guardian of tradition and control. Understanding her perspective didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me see how calculated everything was. This wasn't impulsive behavior. It was strategy. The tension between my husband and me continued to grow. Arguments became more frequent, usually ending with him saying he was exhausted and needed time to think. Each time he said that, I felt like I was losing him a little more. Love started to feel like a negotiation, something I had to prove my worthiness for, instead of something freely given. One afternoon, I received a message from someone I never expected to hear from. It hinted at past conflicts within the family, similar to what I was experiencing now. The message was careful, almost fearful, as if the sender didn't want their involvement known. It suggested that my mother-in-law had a history of pushing people out when they didn't align with her vision. Reading it made my hands shake. This wasn't just my story. It was a pattern. When I confronted my husband with this new information, he reacted defensively. He accused me of digging into things that didn't concern me, of trying to create drama. His words hurt, but what hurt more was the realization that he was protecting her image at all costs. I wondered if deep down he already knew the truth and was too afraid to face it. The house felt colder with each passing day. Conversations were shorter, laughter almost non-existent. I missed the simple comfort we once shared, the feeling of being chosen. Instead, I felt like I was competing with a shadow that loomed over everything we did. The main conflict wasn't just between me and my mother-in-law anymore. It was within my marriage, within my husband, and even within myself. As I stood in the middle of this emotional storm, I knew I was approaching a breaking point. The secrets, the manipulation, the divided loyalties were all building towards something inevitable. I didn't know when it would happen or what form it would take, but I could feel it coming. And with every passing moment, the question grew louder in my mind. When the truth finally comes out, who will my husband stand with? The tension reached a point where even the smallest moments felt heavy. Every shared space in the house carried unspoken questions. When my husband walked in, I searched his face for signs of warmth, reassurance, anything familiar. Most days, I found none. It was like living with someone who looked like my husband, but no longer felt like him. And the closer we got to whatever was coming next, the more I sensed that choices were being made without me. One evening, he told me his mother wanted to meet. Not a casual visit, not a family dinner, but a serious conversation. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. He avoided eye contact, focused on his phone, and added that it would be better if I just listened. That word again. Better. For who? I agreed to go, even though every instinct told me this meeting wouldn't be about peace. The days leading up to it were unbearable. His mother became unusually quiet. No messages, no calls that I knew of. That silence felt intentional, like the pause before something drops. I noticed my husband becoming more restless. He barely slept, snapping at small things, pacing late at night. Whatever his mother was planning, he was aware of it, and that scared me more than anything. I started replaying everything from the beginning, trying to understand how deep this went. I remembered moments when she spoke for him, when decisions were announced instead of discussed. I remembered how quickly she dismissed my opinions, how she always positioned herself as the only one who truly understood him. Slowly, painfully, I realized this wasn't just about me being pushed out. It was about her pulling him back in. The day of the meeting arrived, and the air felt thick from the moment we stepped into her house. The same house where private security once escorted me out now felt even more intimidating. The walls seemed to hold secrets, conversations whispered long before I ever existed in their world. She greeted us calmly, like nothing had ever happened, like humiliation and control were just misunderstandings. As we sat down, I noticed details I hadn't before. The way she positioned herself at the head of the room. The way my husband instinctively sat closer to her than to me. It was subtle, but it spoke volumes. She began talking about family values, loyalty, and sacrifices. Her words were smooth, carefully chosen, but every sentence felt like it carried a hidden message meant just for me. She spoke about how relationships can become distractions, how love can cloud judgment. She talked about trust being broken and how difficult it is to repair. All the while, she looked at my husband, not at me. I felt invisible, like a subject being discussed rather than a person present. When I tried to speak, she smiled politely and said she wasn't finished. My husband stayed quiet. That silence returned, heavier than ever. I waited for him to interrupt, to say something, anything. But he didn't. Instead, he nodded along, as if her version of events made sense to him. I felt something shift inside me, a painful mix of anger and clarity. This meeting wasn't about resolving conflict. It was about setting the stage. Then she mentioned consequences. Not directly, not as a threat, but as a reminder. She spoke about support, about how easily it can be withdrawn, about how fragile stability can be when people forget where they came from. I could see my husband tense. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched. She knew exactly where to apply pressure. On the drive home, the silence between us was unbearable. When I finally asked what that meeting was really about, he told me he needed time. He said he felt pulled in different directions and didn't know what the right choice was anymore. Hearing him say that out loud felt like a punch to the chest. Marriage wasn't supposed to feel like a competition. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she pushing for separation? Control over finances? Total influence over his decisions? The pieces I had collected over weeks suddenly felt like they were coming together, forming a picture I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I realized that whatever her next move was, it would force a reaction from both of us. The next morning, something strange happened. I received a message that changed the tone of everything. It was brief but urgent, warning me that decisions were being finalized, not discussed. It hinted that I might soon be completely shut out. My heart pounded as I read it again and again. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. This was escalation. I tried to talk to my husband, to show him the message, but he brushed me off, saying he had a meeting and couldn't deal with this right now. His avoidance felt deliberate, like he was buying time for something to fall into place. Watching him walk out the door that morning, I felt a deep sense of dread. The man I loved was slipping further away, guided by someone who saw me as an obstacle. As the hours passed, I felt the pressure building. Every phone notification made my heart race. Every passing minute felt like it was bringing us closer to a moment that would define everything. I didn't know what my mother-in-law had planned, but I knew it involved control, power, and forcing a final choice. By the time evening came, the tension was unbearable. I stood by the window, watching the sky darken, feeling like I was standing on the edge of something irreversible. Whatever happened next would change my marriage forever. And as I waited for my husband to return, one thought echoed in my mind louder than all the rest. When the moment comes, will he finally see the truth, or will I be the one left behind? The door finally opened late that night, and the sound alone made my heart jump. My husband walked in slowly, his face unreadable. He didn't greet me, didn't ask how my day was. Instead, he sat down across from me and sighed like he was carrying a weight too heavy to name. I knew, before he even spoke, that something had changed. The air between us felt charged, like one wrong word could set everything off. He told me his mother had made a proposal. He called it a solution, but nothing about it felt like one. She wanted us to take a break. Not a mutual break, not space to heal, but a separation with conditions. Time apart so he could think clearly, so emotions could settle. And during that time, he would stay closer to her. The words barely made sense as they left his mouth. It felt rehearsed, like he was delivering a message instead of sharing his own thoughts. I asked him what he wanted. He didn't answer right away. He said he was confused, that everything felt tangled, that he didn't recognize his life anymore. Hearing that broke something inside me. I wanted to scream that I felt the same way, that I had been feeling lost for weeks, maybe longer. But instead, I listened. I watched how carefully he avoided saying anything that might upset her, even when she wasn't in the room. That's when he mentioned paperwork. Quietly, casually, as if it were no big deal. His mother had already spoken to someone about preparing options, just in case. My chest tightened. This wasn't concern. This wasn't guidance. This was preparation. Planning. She was steps ahead of us, and I was only just being informed. The second plot twist hit me when I realized this wasn't new. This plan had likely been forming long before the private security incident. That moment hadn't been the beginning. It had been a test. A way to see how far she could go, how much control she already had. And my husband's silence back then suddenly made terrifying sense. Over the next few days, things escalated quickly. My access to shared accounts became limited, without explanation. Conversations with my husband became short and careful, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. He spent more time away, always busy, always unavailable. And his mother's presence seemed to grow, even from a distance. Her influence was everywhere. Then I received another message, this one more detailed than the last. It came from someone who had once been very close to the family and had paid a price for it. They warned me that my mother-in-law had done this before. Different circumstances, different people, but the same pattern. Isolation, pressure, control, and eventually erasure. Reading those words made my hands shake. This wasn't just emotional conflict. This was a strategy she had perfected over time. I started to see the fear beneath my husband's confusion. He wasn't just choosing between his wife and his mother. He was choosing between independence and dependence, between a life he built himself and one that was still being managed for him. Understanding that made me feel both sad for him and angry at the situation. One night, I confronted him again, more directly this time. Asked him if he realized how much power she had over him. He reacted defensively, accusing me of trying to turn him against her. The words felt familiar, like an echo. Her words, not his. That's when it hit me fully. This wasn't just manipulation from the outside. It had already settled inside him. The biggest shock came a few days later when I learned that his mother had contacted my family. Not to resolve anything, not to clear misunderstandings, but to control the narrative. She painted herself as worried, concerned, heartbroken. She hinted that I was unstable, that I was creating unnecessary drama. Hearing that made me feel exposed and violated. She wasn't just trying to push me out of her son's life. She was trying to damage my support system too. The stakes were higher now than ever. This wasn't just about saving a marriage. It was about protecting my dignity, my voice, and my future. I realized that staying silent was no longer an option. Every quiet moment gave her more room to shape the story. At the same time, my husband seemed to be unraveling. The pressure from his mother, the guilt, the expectations were crushing him. He started having moments of doubt, moments where he asked questions instead of giving answers. Those moments gave me hope, but they were brief and fragile, easily overshadowed by another phone call, another reminder of what he stood to lose. The tension in our lives reached a level that felt unbearable. Every conversation felt like it could be the last honest one we'd have. Every decision felt loaded with consequences. I could sense that something big was coming, something that would force everything into the open. As I stood there, watching the man I loved struggle between two worlds, I knew the next move would change everything. My mother-in-law believed she was in control. My husband believed he could keep everyone happy. But the truth, the one no one wanted to face, was closing in fast. And when it finally surfaced, it would leave no one untouched. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. One evening, my husband came home looking exhausted, like someone who had been fighting a battle all day and finally ran out of strength. He didn't sit down right away. He stood there, staring at the floor, and said my name in a way that made my chest tighten. I knew this wasn't going to be another half conversation filled with avoidance. He told me everything. He admitted that his mother had been controlling more than just opinions. She had been managing finances tied to his name, decisions he thought were his, and even conversations he believed were private. She had convinced him that I was a risk to his stability, slowly feeding him doubt while presenting herself as his only safety net. Hearing it all out loud was painful, but it was also validating. The confusion, the distance, the sudden changes in him finally made sense. He said the meeting that day wasn't just about a break. She had pushed him to make a final decision. Choose her support or choose me. In that moment, something inside him snapped. For the first time, he questioned why love had to come with threats and conditions. He said he realized that protecting peace shouldn't mean sacrificing his marriage. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was looking at my husband again, not a version shaped by someone else. He apologized. Not just for staying silent, but for doubting me, for letting his fear turn into distance. That apology didn't erase the pain, but it cracked open a door that had been shut tight. The confrontation with his mother happened the very next day. I wasn't there, but I heard every detail afterward. She denied everything at first, dismissed his concerns, and tried to turn the blame back on me. When that didn't work, she shifted tactics, reminding him of everything she had done for him, everything he owed her. But this time, he didn't back down. He told her he was tired of living under control disguised as care. That conversation changed the power dynamic completely. For the first time, she wasn't calm and confident. She was angry, cornered. And that reaction alone confirmed everything he had started to see. The immediate outcome was clear. He chose our marriage. He cut back her involvement in our personal decisions and set boundaries she had never faced before. The private security, the financial pressure, the manipulation all lost their power once he stepped out of fear. The main conflict that had been tearing us apart finally had a resolution. Or so I thought. Because just when it felt like we could breathe again, the final unexpected twist surfaced. While organizing documents and untangling the mess his mother had created, my husband discovered something neither of us saw coming. The separation papers she had prepared just in case weren't recent. They had been drafted months before the private security incident, before any major argument, before she openly turned against me. That realization hit harder than anything else. It meant she had never planned to accept me. From the beginning, she had been preparing for my exit, slowly building a narrative where she would look like the concerned parent and I would disappear quietly. The humiliation, the isolation, the pressure on my husband were all part of a long game. When my husband confronted her with this truth, she didn't deny it. She simply said she did what she believed was necessary. That was the moment he finally understood that her love had limits, and those limits were tied to control. We didn't walk away untouched. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, and healing takes time. But for the first time, the choices being made were ours, not hers. The marriage survived, not because it was easy, but because the truth came out before it was too late. And yet, even now, there's a part of me that stays alert. Because when someone goes that far to control a story, you never really know when they'll try to rewrite it again. That's the part no one prepares you for. The conflict may be resolved, the lines finally drawn, but the experience changes you forever. And as our lives slowly move forward, one thing remains clear in my mind. The real danger wasn't the private security or the threats. It was how quietly manipulation can enter your life, wearing the face of family, and how close it can come to taking everything if you don't see it in time. After everything came out, the house felt different. Not peaceful right away, but quieter in a way that felt honest. The tension that once filled every corner was gone, replaced by a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. My husband and I didn't pretend things were suddenly perfect. We talked slowly, carefully, sometimes awkwardly, but for the first time in a long while, those conversations were real. He took responsibility for rebuilding what had been damaged. Not with big promises, but with consistent actions. He changed passwords, separated finances that never should have been shared, and made it clear that decisions about our marriage would stay between us. Boundaries were set firmly, and while his mother didn't accept them easily, she no longer had the same access or control. The private security, the pressure, the silent threats, all of it faded once the power was taken away. There were still moments when the past crept in. Sometimes I'd catch myself flinching at the sound of his phone ringing, or wondering who was on the other end. Trust doesn't come back all at once. It rebuilds in small pieces. He understood that, and gave me the time and space I needed. That patience meant more to me than any apology ever could. As for my mother-in-law, the distance became permanent, civil, limited, and carefully managed. She tried a few times to regain influence, sending messages framed as concern or offering help that came with strings attached. But this time, we recognized the pattern. We didn't argue. We didn't explain. We simply didn't engage. Losing her grip seemed to affect her more than losing access ever affected us. Family reactions were mixed. Some relatives reached out quietly to apologize for believing the version of events they had been fed. Others stayed distant, choosing comfort over truth. I learned to accept that not everyone will question a powerful narrative, especially when it's easier to believe than to challenge. Letting go of that need for validation was freeing in ways I didn't expect. One of the biggest lessons came from watching my husband grow into his independence. For the first time, he started making choices without checking for approval. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It showed up in small moments: how he spoke, how he handled conflict, how he trusted his own judgment. That change didn't just strengthen our marriage. It changed him. I also changed. I stopped shrinking myself to keep the peace. I stopped apologizing for boundaries. I learned that being calm doesn't mean being silent, and love doesn't mean endurance at any cost. The experience taught me to trust my instincts, even when they're inconvenient or uncomfortable. Looking back, the private security incident feels like a symbol now. Not of fear, but of exposure. It was the moment everything hidden came into the light. Without it, the manipulation might have continued quietly, slowly, until there was nothing left to fight for. Sometimes the most humiliating moments end up being the ones that save you. People often ask how we managed to stay together after something like that. The truth is, not every marriage would, and not everyone should. What made the difference was accountability, awareness, and a willingness to break unhealthy cycles. Love alone wasn't enough. It took courage to face the truth and choose change. Today, our marriage isn't defined by what almost broke it, but by what we learned from it. We're stronger, not because we survived conflict, but because we refused to ignore it. We built something new from the damage, something grounded in respect and clarity. If there's one takeaway I hope stays with you, it's this: control doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like concern, support, or tradition. And family pressure can be just as damaging as any outside force when it's left unchecked. Protecting your peace doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. This story didn't end with revenge or dramatic victories. It ended with truth, boundaries, and growth. And sometimes, that's the most powerful ending of all.